there are a bunch of Bitcoiners that you said, it's your Bitcoin or your life, and they would say, take my life. Right? I mean, that's a real thing. We all know those guys. Those guys are important.
You need that, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you kind of necessarily must have that. Is there something about Bitcoin that lends itself to more of that? Or do you think like there is the same general proportion of that kind of, I don't know, like fundamentalism, that you would see in any sort of movement? Or because this one is like, is this different? You know what I mean?
If you talk to like a Yuval Noah Harari, who's a fucking gimp for the WEF, they keep him in the back of the WEF in a gimp suit, and they bring him out every once in a while. But if you talk to somebody like that, he'll say that, like humans are, we're storytelling monkeys, and we organize ourselves via fictions. And so, these fictions are just very powerful. Because they've caught on at scale, and that's how we organize, and that's why they work, and blah blah blah. And I think that that's bullshit. And I don't think that humans organize themselves around shared fictions. I think humans organize themselves around stories, yes, but stories about shared recognition, stories about things that are true. So Bitcoin is true. That's why people are organizing themselves around it. It really is pretty much that simple. And then the process, it has all this color and flourish, and it's very interesting to watch play out and be a part of. And that's why we're here every day, is because there's nothing else quite as interesting happening on Earth at the current moment. And if there is, probably that new thing that's more interesting, like if AGI becomes a real thing, that will probably take more of my attention than Bitcoin will. But at the moment, Bitcoin's the most exciting story on Earth.
Well, and like that encounter with truth in our current world structure, because it is a nihilistic hellhole out there right now, and it's super fucking dark. And like it's so dark that like that's why you have so much atheism and this like fucked up wokeism, and like those people that you bring up, like if you're like, well, like what do you think about God? They'll kind of, snicker and laugh. God, yeah, like there's some magical guy in the sky, and it's like.
Right.
You're so deep in that fucking darkness that like you're literally incapable of thinking or believing that like maybe there is some other unifying structure to like the entire existence of what it means to be a human and like how we interpret the world. And to me, like that's all that God is. It's this like infinite unifying structure that's like part of the ever unfolding mystery that like as these little like monkeys that are graduating into a higher level of consciousness, like that's fundamentally like what this higher sense of being is like figuring out what that secret is and connecting to that and like having this conscious experience that like awakens and enlightens us to go like, whoa, there like is this bigger thing in the universe that like I can participate and be part of and like see and understand and discover, and like that awakens something very special inside of me, and I can recognize that in others and they can recognize it in me, and like that shared purpose and sense and meaning is all like this alignment thing that helps like make the entirety of humanity better and like gets us farther along. And that's like against like our WEF GIMP friend who's like, no, like it's all just like nihilistic nonsense and like we can make up whatever stories we want. Like that's actually fundamentally fucking evil. And it's pretty interesting because if you approach him about evil, again, he'd be like, like human stories. And this is what Hannah Arendt pointed out in Eichmann in Jerusalem. She's like, we're literally talking to a man that helped participate in the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And like, he can't fucking connect the point that like, this is a question to him directly. And like, so the question when we encounter evil isn't about like, what do we do about them? It's like, what do we do in response to that? And I think that's what's such a big deal about Bitcoin is because when you encounter this truth, and then you look out in this world and they're like, oh, Bitcoin's bullshit. You should buy shitcoin, buy Trump coin, whatever. The question isn't like, well, no, like we have to stop them from shitcoining. It's like, oh fuck, like am I also going to do that? Is that the world that I want to produce? Where like I can't even see what's fucking going on? Or am I going to make a choice to actually pursue a choice towards something that I believe is meaningful and other people see it as meaningful? And as far as I can tell by doing the work, none of us can control or fuck with this thing in a meaningful way that could destroy it. So, maybe that's actually the thing that gets us out of this nihilistic fucking hellhole. And to me, like, now that we've encountered all of these other people that seem to actually really get it on, like, a pretty profound fucking level, like, Bitcoin is inevitable. And it's not inevitable because of, the false sort of destiny ideal that happens, but it's inevitable because now there are truly awakened people who understand what the cost and what this gives us. And like this sort of magically allows for us to exercise ourselves from all of the fucked up circumstances. And very particularly, like as Americans, like I think that we more than any other peoples have a very real destiny that's involved with this. Cause these aren't fucking CCCP values, like the idea of what Bitcoin enables and the sort of free market economic libertarian ideals. No, but that's like a deeply fucking American ideal. And if we can actually use this thing to not only fuck up the American political establishment, we can use that and push that out into the world to like fuck up all this other nonsense communism that's going on. That's a very real fucking danger to all of humanity. Like we do not want the CCCP becoming a major world player any more so than it is now. And like we need to fucking contain that fucking red dragon before it gets out of fucking hand. And it already is out of hand.
By the way, Eric is using the verbiage, fuck shit up, smash shit up, shake it up, which totally, it does do that. But I think also it's just, to me, it's a very restorative movement technology philosophy. Like it gives us back a lot of things that we lost. And it's a restoration project, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sort of an interesting thing too that we as millennials have spent our life here on this restoration project on money, because I was thinking about this recently, and I think that is actually the core millennial calling, is to find a restoration project. If even something trivial like beer sucks, right? Let's create the craft brew movement. Okay, now we have a bunch of cool beers. That's cool. Thank you, hipsters, right? Or culture sucks. Okay, let's go back and re-examine why our culture is so shit. Or the money sucks. Okay, let's go back and re-examine it. I think a lot of there was this 100 years of centralization that occurred, basically since the Federal Reserve was put in. We could get into a whole quagmire there, but I'll skip over it. There's this period of 100 years of increasing centralization, basically because of the central banking system. And the Millennial Restorative Project, if millennials actually are going to be the hero generation, or some subset of them are going to be, is to undo the last 100 years. Because the last 100 years were bullshit.
I like that idea of kind of restoration of things, because it does, something I've just been thinking about is what would the world look like if just the Federal Reserve hadn't existed, as an example, or even just we can go more recent, still before any of our times, but if Nixon hadn't finally taken us that last final step off the gold standard, what would, would we be living in a future where maybe there wasn't that dire need for Bitcoin to be created? Satoshi didn't put all the pieces together because maybe the problem wasn't as acute. And so, maybe in a way it's we live, I'm very grateful to live at this time, because it's man, we get to see the phase shift, and we get a lot of fucked up stuff along the way, but at least we get to be here while things are changing, and while there are actually tools available to us, open source technologies that actually allow us to have a fighting chance at putting this bastard of a genie of fiat degeneracy back in the bottle, and then I don't know, incinerating. I don't know how you kill a genie, because if you but we can get into that later, how to dispose of a genie. But the point being, man, what a cool fucking thing that we get to be around for this, that we get to, at least be near the place where this is all taking place. And hopefully things do get a heck of a lot better. But I agree also that man, this needs to be the antidote to the fucking communism streak, to the red wave of things that masquerades under oh no, but we'll do business with the West, and we'll definitely steal all of your tech, and then we'll sell it back to you. And so, yeah, we're actually kind of capitalist here. So don't pay any attention to us. It's fundamentally Bitcoin is anti-authoritarian and anti-centralization. And both of those things just describe many of the most disgusting governments in the world. So it is incompatible with those, and it most closely aligns with Western American ideals. And so that's a good thing. It is kind of incumbent on America to be the first mover in that from a large geopolitical standpoint. And let's hope, I also, Hodl, I mean, goddamn Trump didn't do the executive Bitcoin order in the first hour, and I'm going to lose it. Just so you know, I'm going to lose it.
Well, I'm
But-
I'm going to give him a month to kind of get his shit together. He is kind of like the most important person in the world who's kind of busy with a lot of stuff.
Why isn't
like,
he talking about Bitcoin right now? Right now.
I want to cut him that slack. But with what Hodl said, it's like this truly is a restoration movement, and part of that restoration is reconnecting literally to the Enlightenment and understanding that like the world isn't nihilistic nonsense. Like there is actually a greater and truer purpose, and what Bitcoin offers, and all of this open source technology we're working on, like it not only does it rescue us from that, but like there's no reason why this doesn't become not even just a 1,000-year project, but like this just becomes the rhymazone of the whole of human history forever. Like however far out humanity can go. And like that's a fucking crazy idea. Because despite how powerful the machines get, it seems very clear from the math that's been done that like this cryptography is solid and should last forever. And it's very hard for us in our little fucking monkey minds to deal with what that means. And like to me, I'm always just blown away at how powerful and sophisticated cryptography is, and the sort of and how new it is. You know, like SHA-256 was only made in what, like 2004 or something, and so like it's really important to understand like how radical all of this is in the scheme of human development. And the fact that we're just kind of standing at when all of this got brought together it's pretty amazing and powerful, and is one of the reasons that like I sincerely do think that we are at a phase shift moment in humanity on a total because of how powerful and unique these tools are. And the fact that like now cryptography is widely deployed and understood as we're getting AGI like that. Because to me, as far as I can tell, like cryptography is the only thing that we can use to actually meaningfully demarcate with AGI. You know, and like that's going to become so fucking important in generalized key management when there are rogue AI agents out there that can absolutely hammer fuck people who don't understand what key management is or how you should be utilizing it.
I think I want to go back to this question that Walker asked a few minutes ago, which was what would the world look like, right? And like I think when I think of like restoration, I think about my children, and you know, Bitcoin is this big global project that we hope to leave to all humanity, which includes our children, our grandchildren, and our great grandchildren, etc. And you know, I think we're winning on that front. I think we're gonna win, but sometimes that's a little bit like too large. It's too ephemeral. And so when I think about my own children, I think about just showing them something, whatever it is, a community, you know, restoration project, you know, a piece of land, a business, something that helps people or something that beautifies the world in some way, and just saying, hey, look at this little corner of the world that I made good for you, you know? And that it really like brings it down to earth in that sense, because I think when we think about like the way the world could have been, it's hard to know what we've lost out on it. I think about that John Lennon song, Working Class Hero, where he goes, you think you're so clever and classless and free, but you're still fucking peasants as far as I can see. And it's like, we don't know what we don't know, what we missed out on. How much wealth, how much value was destroyed by fiat currency, and how much of that value could have been compounded into the future? And we're supposed to be the inheritors of that wealth, but we were basically stiffed. And so it was kind of up to us to look around and say, well, how do we fix it? Like the blockchain of humanity threw an error. And that doesn't happen in every generation. In fact, you know, you can go on for many generations without ever getting an error. But fiat is an error. And we had to take a good hard look around and say, how can we fix that so that we can kickstart the engine of global capitalism, so that we can push value into the future rather than extracting value from the future in order to live for today? Because the boomers had no compunction about doing that to us, but I personally find it to be a moral blight that I would ever do that to my children or to global society's children, right? And so we want to push value into the future, and then we want to compound that value. And what can the world be in 1,000 years if we have increased the global GDP by 7% a year? Like, the compounded rate of return on that is insane, and it literally gets us to, like, you know, space utopia shit. so to me, it's like that's the big idea. And then the small idea of restoration is do what you can where you are with what you have available to you and be able to show something to your children that's meaningful. Don't have this baby boomer mindset of like, well, that's just the way it is. All right, see you later, kids. All right. Don't do that. Don't do that to your kids, man.
Pick yourself up by your bootstraps like I did when things were, I bought this house for 2 raspberries. You don't have 2 raspberries, son? Why don't you get a job? It's like, Jesus.
I just don't understand how their heads are so far up their own fucking asses in terms of like, well, like it blows my mind. And like, I have a lot of tension with my parents because like like I've obviously been involved in talk about this and like we can't really break through anywhere. And it's such a struggle because I'm like, how do you look at like my generation and see that like nobody owns homes, everybody's struggling, that like it's just desperation across the board, and you're just like have nothing to do with that. And it's funny because like I very directly remember when I was younger, like having a conversation in my early 20s with my parents of them being like, look, like you like can't change the world. You just like have to like do the little bit you can. And like, that's it. And I just remember like, that was a strong breakthrough. I was like, fuck no. I was like, I fundamentally reject that. Like, we can all put our hands in the machine and like move it a fucking little bit. And like, if you don't accept that, like, yeah, you're going to get whatever fucking nonsense it is. And that was one of the things that kind of had me go off on my own march and find my own journey without needing to turn back for their approval. And I don't know, like, I feel very similar to Hodl in that, like, it's so meaningful to me to make sure that I leave things for my children so that they look back at me and they go, like, Dad did some shit right, And like I live out here in the middle of the woods, and like one of the things I'm committed to is like keeping this home that I have. I have a beautiful orchard. Like I have 4 magnificent fucking sequoias that are probably like 120 feet tall on my property that like that's just for us to have forever because of how fucking incredible they are. And it's so meaningful to have that. And also, like, I talked to my son about, because he's like, where are you traveling to and what you're doing? And I'm like, look, like, I could just hang out at home and live this great life with you, but I feel a greater meaning to explain to people and try to show them what this sort of wacky philosophical ideal and belief I have about Bitcoin is. And people seem to hear it and want to hear more of it. And, like, I feel strongly pulled towards trying to flesh all of that out. And I think it's like a lifelong project. So it's going to keep being what I do. And he gets it, and it's pretty fucking cool. And so I'm excited watching him grow up and instill these values and start interacting with it.
Do you think another thing I think about like forward looking is if Bitcoin wins, which I think like Bitcoin is winning, but like whatever, I don't want to get too technical about what Bitcoin winning looks like. I think it looks like this right now, but like I don't know how like where that goes to. Do you think there's ever a risk of like maybe it's not our kids, but maybe it's maybe it's our grandkids, maybe it's our great grandkids, like the complacency of not remembering how bad things were because life does improve so markedly, and then you have a potential for some reversion back to a prior state? Or does the long-term game theory of Bitcoin kind of just not incentivize that sort of reversion? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a chance of complacency in future generations? Because they weren't around when the shit was like it is now. They weren't around for fiat just ruining everything.
I think certainly that there's a high chance of apathy and complacency, both for all inheritors of systems. I think you see that with the baby boomers who were the inheritors of the American institutions that they ended up spearheading, and were sort of apathetic and careless in their stewardship of those institutions, and now we're facing this plethora of problems because of that. And I think that's a very human thing that Bitcoin doesn't get rid of. But I will say that Bitcoin is a ruthless game of efficient market capitalism, and if you incorrectly economically calculate, the Bitcoin goes away from you and it doesn't come back to you. So if you have a family fortune of 6.15 Bitcoin in the future, which is going to be a lot, it's going to be a whole lot, and you own the entire state of Rhode Island or something, well, then, if your inheritors do a bad job managing that capital, it's going to go away from them and it's going to go to somebody else who's a more ruthless and efficient capitalist, which is, on net a good thing. The thing I worry about is like maybe if we're at some level where like permanent ossification is not possible, and then we have continual code upgrades and people get apathetic to the like adversarial nature of Bitcoin, and they start treating it more, like let's like tack our wish list on here, and then you start getting these bastardization, like somebody, basically a couple hundred years from now, somebody comes along and they're like, 21 million was because Erik Cason was a Nazi. We should have 79 million. Like, or it's just like some weird argument, right? All these Casonites here today. I see you, and I know you're on drugs. First of all, second of all, fuck yourself.
It's a sacred practice. Well, my answer to your question, Walker, is that I think like the turning cycle that we go through is like the next great thing is going to be like all of the apathy happens when we've like hit the hash horizon and like Mars is well colonized and like the Martians are fucking pissed that like they don't get to meaningfully participate in the Bitcoin economy, and that like they're fucked over just because they're outside of the hash horizon. And like it's going to be Drew Branzel's whole Mars coin theory playing out, and it's going to be about an interstellar war between the Martians and Earth. And that Earth has gotten fat and lazy on the fact that like they have the Bitcoin standard and that everything operates pretty smoothly, and they get to extract resources not only from Mars but from the Belt and Mercury and other places, and that like they just have a money that works. And so it's going to be pretty wild. But like the other thing to appreciate is that like the future is so wide, because like we have no understanding of how far we've been set back. And like the thing I'm more excited than anything about is like unfucking the money unfucks a bunch of stuff, and like unfucking the development of general human thought and action is so important. And like one of the things that blows my mind is thinking about I forget what podcast it was on, but Eric Weinstein pointed out, he was like, if I had $10 million just to do development around physics, he was like, I guarantee I'd be making breakthroughs within 3 to 5 years. And like we've lost out on that in so many places. I've been looking at like early aeronautics experiments, and it was literally bicycle mechanics that just like kept pushing themselves forward that became like the first dudes to make planes and start flying them. And like, you can't do any of that shit today because of the regulatory environment. And like, what if people were all able to just like fuck around with rocketry and rail cannons and all kinds of shit? And I think when we get back to a Bitcoin standard, the way that logic will start actually pushing itself to the forefront of all forms of development is really going to break out all kinds of shit. And that's so exciting to me. Not to mention, like, geographically, how different is the world going to get distributed now that, like, we can just develop energy infrastructure fucking anywhere. So, like, there's no reason that, like, the interior of Alaska doesn't have megalopolises, or, that out in Tierra del Fuego, there isn't, like, new archipelagical developments that are going, like, there's all kinds of shit to be done. And it's really fucking exciting, particularly if you're coming in from like nihilistic, darkness, hopeless fiat land. And so like I don't know, this is the place that I feel really good about it. And it's great to talk with you guys, because like you go back out into normie land, like particularly here in fucking liberaltopia, and they're like, oh, it's the worst day that's ever happened. And I'm not sure, you guys might hear in the background, it sounds like seals, but it's actually just the wailings of liberals.
No, Ross Stevens had a great example of like you can think of a rural waterfall in Africa somewhere that has, there's no reason for anybody to go there, but if you put hydropower there and you start running a Bitcoin mine there, suddenly you have an energy resource, and then you're uploading to Starlink or whatever, and then you have a town that forms around this energy resource, and suddenly it's like, a couple hundred years on in the future, like Eric said, you have a megalopolis in the middle of rural Africa where this water source was, where before there was nothing. So there's all these untapped resources that we haven't even gotten to yet.
But Bitcoin wastes energy. I saw that green people. Oh, just the fucking retards with like not. And then I'm like, oh wow, you're like an expert in energy policy. Like, what do you think we should do with negatively priced energy? And they're like, huh? But what? And I'm like, oh, like with you having such strong opinions about Bitcoin and knowing how it wastes energy, I thought maybe you knew something about how energy markets function. But you don't, do you? Maybe you should shut the fuck up and do some homework before you have an opinion about this shit. It pisses me off. Like, you can read and, like, put thoughts together. Why don't you do that? Oh, because you like being poor and being a slave because it's easier than needing to fucking make real decisions about your life and taking risks on things. That's like the embarrassing truth is, like, most people are too fucking afraid to ever take a chance on anything. Like, that's the one that really pisses me off, is I give people all the homework, they get close to it, and they're like, I don't know, it, like, seems like a big risk. And I'm like, you drove your fucking car here, and you trusted all the other shitheads on the road not to drive directly into you. Like, that's a risk in and of itself, dipshit. Life is a risk. Fucking take it, or be the goddamn slave they've designed you to be. But I'm sure we both know you already made that fucking decision, or had it made for you more accurately. Sorry, I'm in a bad mood.